your organization has obviously been such an important part to FCLT since the very beginning. Could you just talk a little bit about why a long-term approach is so important to New Zealand Super?
Sure. Well, New Zealand Super is a long-term investor. We invest to smooth out the cost of national superannuation over a long period of time. We're expected to continue to grow until 2080. So long horizon, we care about the horizon. We care about generating wealth over the long term.
And can you talk a bit about how you approach that practically?
Sure. So one of our investment beliefs, and investment beliefs are important foundations for our strategies, one of our investment beliefs is that investors with a long horizon can outperform investors with a short horizon. And very simply, that's because they can access opportunities that short horizon investors can't. That doesn't always mean illiquid assets. It might mean different types of strategies. But what it does mean is you've got a broader suite of opportunities in front of you than a short-term investor.
Makes sense. One of the areas that FCLT is looking at are the risks and opportunities to long-term capital. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the differences between capital allocation, some of the risks, some of the opportunities when you're looking at a sort of short-term versus a long-term decision?
Sure. So over the short term, risks like market risk and liquidity risk play a much bigger role, certainly get measured much more often and monitored. But over the longer term, the risks for us are really, what are the risks that will stop us from meeting our purpose? That's smoothing that return. And for us, these become then much more long-term changes in markets, or things like climate change, or other changes that are going on, demographic change, inequality. And so they're much harder to get your head around, much more difficult, potentially provide more opportunity, but certainly bring with them plenty more risk.
So if you're comfortable, can you just talk a little bit, we'll take climate change as an example, knowing there's been lots of work done by you on that. Talk about how you have approached the whether it's the pricing or the consideration of the risk of let's say, climate change as an example in your portfolio.
Sure. So for us, our mandate says maximise return without undue risk. And one of the ways we thought about climate risk is in our portfolio, across the whole portfolio, through all the supply chains, there's this risk that carbon is not being priced properly. In particular, emissions, carbon dioxide emissions aren't being priced properly. And the risk is that at some point they do. So climate change risk has a number of different facets. There's the risk of policy change as governments change their approach and increase the price of carbon. There's the risk of technological change as we move to a low carbon economy. And there's also the physical risks. You've got chronic changes in weather patterns or acute changes in weather patterns. All of those things can impact all of our assets. So it's quite a big thing to get your head around. So where we got to with it was we said, well, we think that after reviewing the data and the evidence, and there's not heaps of really good long-term data, as you might expect, but we think that markets don't do a good job of pricing that long-term transition to the low-carbon economy. In particular, it's not priced in the impact of carbon emissions. So people say, well, surely it's priced in because isn't the market efficient? We say, well, actually, not always. Most people are doing a little bit of active management. We think that, and so obviously they don't believe it's totally efficient, but we looked at it and said, where's the weight? If we're wrong and markets are pricing it properly, then what we've done is we've sold some on average fairly priced assets and bought some on average fairly priced assets. What we're pretty confident in is that the market's not overpricing it. So we don't think the market's overpricing the risk of climate change. So what we said was, well, we think it's not priced properly, therefore we think it's undue risk, and we can deal with it as an investment risk. So this is an investment risk decision for us. We reduced the exposure to emissions and carbon reserves in our portfolio quite significantly, and that resulted in the first instance in selling about $1 billion of our equities portfolio and replacing it, essentially upscaling all the other assets in the portfolio.
You mentioned inequality as well. I'm intrigued how you, similar kind of question to the one I just asked, but different subject.
Sure.
Talk to me a bit about how you think about that one.
Well, that's just one of these really intractable ones.
Yeah, that
I think,
feels even...
It's even harder. So, so we just had a session on risks and opportunities, and, we said, well, what are the ones that people are really having a hard time with. It's things like someone suggested end of system risks, because of course we can't imagine a world where the capitalist system fails. So that what is the impact of an increase in inequality on political stability and therefore market stability? I don't know. How do you get your head around
Spin
that?
the crystal ball.
This is one of those that it's inherent in it, but I'm not sure that we found anyone who's got a decent toolkit for that. So that's one of the things that, as we think about the risk to our portfolio, that's a hard one. Other ones you can translate more easily into sort of financial scenarios, and you can run them through, and you can say, what happens if China deleverages, or what happens if emerging markets have a credit crunch, or whatever. You can put those through. Some of those ones, they're just more existential and really hard.
Work in progress.
Yeah.
Just want to close on it by asking for what advice you would give to somebody who wants to be either a corporation that wants to be more long-term in their orientation as an investor, what you would say to them, or perhaps to a peer or a colleague who is trying to be more long-term in the way that they approach their own investing.
So I guess the key, and this has come through in a bunch of the sessions that I've been to, is you've got to understand what your purpose is. And so having defined your purpose, you can then define your strategy. So where we start with that is we've got a clear purpose. We're going to smooth out the cost of national superannuation. We've got a set of investment beliefs that we agree with the board. So really fundamental, our board agrees with all of these beliefs. And so once we've worked through those, we close that gate and we bring them into the next one, and we say, all right, as a result of those beliefs, we're going to operate with these strategies, and you set up the strategies that are based on those, and then you go and get the people who can manage those strategies. So, but there's a quite deliberate process in that, which is agree the purpose, so define what the outcome looks like that you want to hit, then agree your base foundations, which in our case are investment beliefs and values, and then go from there to strategies, rather than leap straight to, I'm going to do this great double dip strategy which is going to make us lots of money. Well, what's the point of that? It's not related to your purpose.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time, and thanks very much for all you do for FCLT.
No trouble.
Thank you.
Thanks.